Hello, fellow bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I am very excited for Jane Austen July, and I hope you are as well. I've got my Pride and Prejudice t-shirt on and a whole stack of books here off screen that I can't wait to chat with you about. They're books that I hope to read for the challenges this Jane Austen July. If you'd like some more information about this wonderful month-long readathon that celebrates Jane Austen and her works, as well as her time period and her legacy, I'd love to refer you back to the announcement video, my announcement video, as well as my co-hosts Katie from Books and Things and Claudia from Spinster's Library. They all share some really great recommendations of books that we've loved in previous years. We've been doing this for 4 years now, and so we've read some really great Jane Austen related books in the past. But today, like I said, I want to share the books that I am personally excited for, as well as maybe 1 or 2 recommendations that I didn't include in the announcement video. I may have gotten a little too excited about Jane Austen July and started reading some things in June, so I will recommend those here as well. The first challenge is to read one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels, and for this one I am going to go with the group read-along of Pride and Prejudice. This is the copy I'll be reading from, and I can't wait to see what new developments I will find in Pride and Prejudice. Every time I return to this book, there's something new and exciting to learn and discover. So I really hope that you will be reading this one along with us this year. The information for the group read-along is in the description box down below. This is a really wonderful book, all about the 5 Bennet daughters and their quest to make decent marriages. With no sons in the family, the Bennet daughters have this immense pressure to marry and to marry well in order to achieve long-term financial security. It's such a fun book. It looks at marriage and class in really interesting ways, and it just contains some of Austen's most beloved characters. I actually think this is a really wonderful place to start if you are new to Austen's work, and what better way to start Jane Austen July than to read one of her most famous and beloved works with a large group of Janeites. The second challenge, to read one of Jane Austen's works that is not one of her main 6 novels. I will be participating in the group read-along and reading Lady Susan, which is Jane Austen's novella. It's written in epistolary form, so it's a series of letters, and it's all about the beautiful, flirtatious, and recently widowed Lady Susan Vernon, who tries to secure a favorable second marriage for herself while trying to force her poor daughter into a far less desirable match. Lady Susan is shockingly different than Austen's other heroines. She is older, but she's also really manipulative and ruthless and conniving. She's kind of horrible, and she's absolutely delightful to read about. So I highly recommend joining along with us and reading this. Plus, there is a great movie adaptation, which I will talk about later on. The third challenge is to read a nonfiction work about Jane Austen or her time period, the late Georgian or Regency era. And for this, I have some choices, 2 of which are actually both gifts from Heather from Fresh Parchment. So the first one is a biography of Jane Austen by Claire Tomalin. This has been on my shelves for a little while, and I hear that it's a very solid biography of Jane Austen. So I could pick this up, or I also have The Genius of Jane Austen, Her Love of Theater and Why She Works in Hollywood by Paula Byrne. Paula Byrne is a scholar, and so this is a bit more dense than some of the other nonfiction works that I have in front of me. But this is all about Jane Austen and her relationship to the theater, her relationship to Shakespeare, as well as why she is so adaptable to Hollywood. When I was first gifted this, I read a few pages and decided that I had to devote some time to reading it at some point. The next book is another gift from Heather, and that is Harriette Wilson's Memoirs, the greatest courtesan of her age. So Harriette Wilson was a famous courtesan who was hired by some of the most distinguished people in the Regency era. When she reached middle age and could no longer make money in the way she was used to, she decided to publish her memoirs and basically blackmail all of the distinguished people that hired her in the past. It's kind of brilliant and something that I definitely want to read at some point. Though it's a little chunky, so I may not get around to it this Jane Austen July. Another nonfiction book that I'm very interested in is by Hallie Rubenhold, who wrote The Five, which I absolutely adored. Apparently all of her other books are actually set during Jane Austen's time period, or rather the late Georgian era. But the one I'm interested in is Covent Garden Ladies, which kind of follows a similar theme as the Harriette Wilson memoirs. It's about the sort of seedier underbelly of the time period that Jane Austen was writing. Because of course Jane Austen writes about proper upper middle class women in drawing rooms, but she doesn't take us to seedy brothels or back alleys or anything like that. So I'm trying to supplement in some other works that kind of show that side to Regency England as well. Another book that I really would like to read this July was gifted to me by Pegasus Publishing, and it is The Time Traveler's Guide to Regency Britain by Ian Mortimer. This seems like the next best thing to hopping in a time machine and traveling back to Jane Austen's time. It discusses everything from the stylish Beau Brummel and Lord Byron to the Battle of Trafalgar and Waterloo, and it promises to put Jane Austen's work into context with everything else going on in the time period. So like I said, lots of nonfiction for me to choose from. I'm sure some of that nonfiction will be put off to a later date, but I'm really excited about all of those works. The fourth challenge is to read a modern retelling of a Jane Austen book, or to read a piece of historical fiction that takes place in Jane Austen's time. And for this, I have a lot of choices as well. I'm having so much trouble narrowing challenge 3 and 4 down, but before I get into the choices that I have to make, I just wanted to mention 2 books that I read in the month of June that I absolutely loved that would fit into this 4th challenge. The first one is Tracy Chevalier's Remarkable Creatures. This book is about fossil hunting spinsters and the real-life fossil hunters Mary Anning and Elizabeth Philpott. It's a brilliant book, and I can't wait to share more about it in a June wrap-up. This one would go amazing with Persuasion because it takes place in Lyme for the most part, and that, of course, appears in Persuasion. This book does such a great job of portraying a version of Lyme where you can imagine Jane Austen strolling down the street or even taking a look at one of these wonderful fossils that Mary Anning or Elizabeth Philpott discovered. I'd also like to quickly recommend Reputation by Lex Croucher. This book was absolutely brilliant. It felt very, very modern, but very Regency at the same time. I would say if you like Bridgerton, you would love this book. It kind of reminded me of Mean Girls meets Bridgerton, in fact. So it's a rom-com kind of a book, but there's a lot more depth to it than that. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I devoured it in a single weekend, and I actually pre-ordered the new book by Lex Croucher, Infamous, which comes out July 21st in the UK. And in the US, we have to wait longer, but I couldn't wait, so I ordered the British version. So there are 4 books that I am deciding between for the 4th challenge, and the first one is The Jane Austen Project, which proves to be a time-traveling adventure about Jane Austen. I believe Jane Austen is a character in this one, and some time travelers go back in time, meet her, and obtain a new novel by her. It just seems like a really wonderful piece of speculative fiction. I also have 2 Pride and Prejudice retellings that I could potentially read. The first is Ayesha at Last, and this is Pride and Prejudice if Lizzie Bennet was a modern-day Muslim girl. I also have Unmarriageable by Sonia Kamal, and this one is billed as Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan. I've heard really good things about this one, so I'm leaning towards this, but also I think somebody said Ayesha was great as well. So if you had to read one of these two, which do you think you should read? That is my question to you guys, because I'm going to need some help narrowing these choices down. The last book is a work of historical fiction, and that is Burning Bright by Tracy Chevalier. This takes place in 1792 and is all about the poet Blake and two fictional, I believe they're fictional, neighbors who inspire him to write songs of innocence and experience. Tracy Chevalier did such a beautiful job with remarkable creatures that I would love to read this one as well. On to the fifth challenge, which is to read something by a contemporary of Jane Austen. So for that, I have two choices. The first is a very obvious choice considering the last book I just talked about, and that is Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience. I read this in college years ago, and I have that copy full of my annotations. It would be nice to revisit this, especially in light of reading Burning Bright. So these two kind of go together in a sense. Another option that I have for this challenge is an ebook that I found called Memoirs of Emma Courtney by Mary Hayes. This was published in 1796, and it recounts tales of Emma's life to her adopted son, Augustus, and it includes her complicated love affair with his father. This book is supposedly inspired by events from Mary Hayes' own life, as well as her acquaintance with radical political philosophers such as William Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft. Apparently, this was really controversial in its time, taking themes of female sexuality, adultery, and suicide into account. So that book intrigues me as well. This TBR is just too ambitious, and I would love your help in narrowing it down before July comes around. The sixth challenge is to watch a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book, and for that there are so many choices, but I think I am definitely going to watch the brand new Persuasion adaptation that's coming out on Netflix. I believe it's July 15th or 16th. I watched the trailer, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little worried. I feel like just based on the trailer they have completely changed Anne Elliot's character, but that's okay, I'm going to watch it anyway. And since we're reading Lady Susan, I'm also going to watch Love and Friendship, which it's annoying that the movie is called Love and Friendship because Love and Friendship is a different work of Jane Austen Juvenilia, but it's an adaptation of Lady Susan, and it's absolutely delightful. I pretty much watch it every year for Jane Austen July and then forget to tell you guys, but that's okay. I'm definitely watching it this year, and I absolutely love that movie. The seventh and last challenge is to watch a modern screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book, and for this I might have already watched two while getting very excited for Jane Austen July. So to be honest, I'm probably going to watch both of those again before July is over. And those are Austenland, which is a favorite of mine. It doesn't really follow any one book. Maybe it's kind of an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. Adaptation is a really loose term. Maybe it's just slightly inspired by Pride and Prejudice. But it's absolutely wonderful. It's about this massive Jane Austen fan who takes her dream vacation. She goes to England, to this country manor where they live as if it's Regency England. And a lot happens from there. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch it. It's kind of goofy and funny and a little offbeat, but it's a wonderful rom-com. I'm a huge fan of that one. And then there is also Fire Island, which is new. That is on Hulu, and it is Pride and Prejudice if the Bennet sisters were 5 gay guys. And it's brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And like I said, I plan on watching it again in July. Watching it once in June was not enough. It does a lot of really smart things with the original. Kind of reminds me of Clueless. Like what Clueless does for Emma, Fire Island does for Pride and Prejudice, if that makes sense. So that was my very loose TBR for you. At the moment, it's kind of just a pool of possibilities. I need some help narrowing it down. Please help me narrow it down. I would love some recommendations in the comments down below. Which of these books do you think I should make higher priority? Which have you read before and enjoyed? And even if you've never heard of any of these books before, what do you plan on reading for Jane Austen July? Because I am so excited, and I know if you clicked on this video and made it this far through the video, you must be just as excited as well. So until next time, I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Bye!